I had the privilege and the honor of going for Mass at a care home. Now, I didn't know where I was going in this care home. I even, had to kind of find my way there. And once I arrived there, I was welcomed by two disciples of Christ. I call them disciples of Christ because they're more than volunteers. They are doing this ministry in the name of Christ. What a blessing that is. And then as I got close to the place where we were going to have Mass, this one woman was so ecstatic that I was there, and she was so hospitable, and she was just full of energy, and I was quite excited to be in her presence. And as we sat at the table to have Mass, we all sat as equals at this table. The one woman in a wheelchair never stopped smiling. She was just content, peaceful in the moment. And I couldn't help but be touched by that. Now, the very ecstatic woman after Mass, she actually pushed that same woman in the wheelchair back to where she needs to go. And so, sometimes we fear going among the blind, the crippled, the lame, and so forth. And yet, oftentimes, this is where we are awakened to God's presence more than anywhere else. And this is what Jesus is really encouraging us. Of course, we are not to strive for the seat of honor. And really, the seat of honor is the cross of Christ. He took the lowest place and transformed it into the seat of honor. And we all participate in that one suffering of Christ because we're finite beings and they're suffering. And so whatever is going on in the world, whether it's war, whether it's another act of violence of some sort, that's the one suffering. That's, participating in the injustice of the cross of Christ. But then let's not forget the resurrection. We participate in the resurrection of the one Christ. And neither one cancels either out. And so in that first reading from the book of Sirach, it's really encouraging us to be humble. Sometimes we think life is about our life situation, but life is about God. And because, sometimes I might think, everything's going well in my life and I'm so blessed by God. But we're just simply blessed to be alive and to participate in the suffering of God and the resurrection of God. And just to humbly accept that. And it's actually too much for us to fully embrace. And, there's a transformation, as pointed out in the letter to the Hebrews. There's a contrast between where God gave the covenant on Mount Sinai versus Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. The law can give us information, but it's really God's grace that gives us transformation. And so as we gather around the table, Lord, we're going to see transformation. We are going to be present with the presence of Christ that's always present with us, but hopefully in this little humble way that God becomes present to us, we can see that we do have seats of honor in the eyes of God, and we may go out and be present with the blind, the crippled, and the lame, and so forth, and see what a blessing it is to journey with all people.